What's up, everybody? This is Chris. I'm joined with Terry and Eric. Now, we are the lucky few who have seen Star Wars The Force Awakens already. And, you know, if you're watching this, you probably have seen it by now as well.
Please do at this point.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it,
go far away.
Please go rectify that, because what we're doing right now is a spoiler conversation. This is a very special episode of Keeping It Real. And probably one of the most special episodes we've ever done, because we have brand new Star Wars to talk about, and brand new Star Wars that we all pretty much loved. So I want to kick off the
full
conversation.
Spoilers again. Please leave.
This is your last
this is your
warning.
Last chance. We have all the things, all the secrets. We're gonna spoil it.
Yeah.
So get out of here.
Yeah.
You've been warned.
You've been warned.
Now I want to talk, just to kick off, because there's a lot of stuff to dig into here, but you know, a lot of new characters got introduced in this film, and I want to know from you guys, what did you think worked the best, and who was your favorite new character?
I really loved Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. I thought he was a fantastic villain, probably one of the most complex characters we've seen, if not the most complex, other than Anakin, Darth Vader. I loved just how, pissy he was. He would throw these forced temper tantrums. And the first time that happened, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted out of this character.
Yeah.
I like that he's very flawed. He's trying to fight to be on the dark side, which we haven't necessarily seen before. We really have seen people trying to avoid that. And I think, you know, there's a question about whether or not he's redeemable about, again, spoilers, when he kills his father, Han Solo, two huge things. I know.
Yes.
But yeah, that's him trying to go past the point of no return.
Yeah.
I think, you know, we've seen so many shades of Grey in him.
It's the point of no return. Sorry. Throwing Phantom of the Opera references in here. Sorry.
For me, it'll be Kylo Ren and Rey. I mean, Kylo Ren, like you said, there was a lot of things about him that were different to this series. Just the idea, that he is a bad guy who is fighting the goodness within him from the get-go. It's one thing with the, there's still good in you Darth Vader thing, but there's another thing that he's this sort of damaged, sad, sometimes pathetic young guy who is so desperately wants to be what this thing he thinks he's supposed to be, and yet it's not his nature, and he seems really screwed up. And I also like that him just sort of trashing stuff, and just there's sort of a spoiled, pissed off kid there that really worked, and it could have just come off as what the hell's going on, but he was also dangerous.
I love that they played into that too. There's that one scene where he's flipping out and there are stormtroopers
they
walking
stop.
and they just turn around and walk.
Great beat. That was a great beat. And because you get the idea, oh, this is happening again.
Yeah.
Freaking Kylo Ren again.
I wonder how many stormtroopers have died by his blade just from being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I guess he's following Darth Vader's.
Yeah. But it's funny because they played with our expectations in that scene when the guy comes to give him the bad news. Oh, he's going to kill him, but instead he starts trashing everything. Again, it's just he's trying to emulate something that he's not, and that was really interesting.
You said Rey, though.
And then Rey,
Yeah, Daisy Ridley, Virtual Unknown.
Crushed it.
Yes.
Crushed it.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Such a
She's so
great
great.
heroine. From the first time we see her scavenging, just she had me. And I thought that she is a character unlike any that we've seen before in a Star Wars movie. Very capable, very athletic, very much can survive on her own.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you like her?
You said a lot of it. I mean, just liked her from the get-go, like sort of her spirit, loved when Finn went to sort of save her and she'd already beaten up the guys. I don't know. There was just something really innately likable about Daisy Ridley, which you kind of got the impression of when she was just doing press. But yes, you saw it in the movie because none of us had seen her in anything. And then, they earned, the moment when she makes the lightsaber fly to her, which was probably the biggest cheer that wasn't related to seeing someone we already loved in my audience. That was such a great moment.
The best thing about that scene for me was that the second that saber went in the snow, you knew it was coming back to her, and you were just anticipating, and it paid off. And when she lit that thing up, it was that's the scene I got the most emotional about in the movie, actually, where I was like, oh, hell yeah, we're seeing the birth of this new hero, really. And, she is diametrically opposed to evil. And I think that was just super powerful, and it was just nice to see. It was just nice to see somebody new be a Jedi, we finally are oh, cool, a Jedi that isn't going to get killed in the ring in 3 seconds.
Right.
Somebody who's going to really carry forward in the series and be an important character. And she just was she was warm and sort of affable the entire time, athletic, like you said, just like really all the things that you need to be, and she was great. But I want to say BB-8 for me.
Oh my God,
Every
BB-8.
time,
It might be my wife's pick too, by the way.
every time BB-8 was like, it was like the best animal person robot thing ever, because you could ascribe your own feelings onto him, but also the I don't know what you call it, remote control acting. The remote control acting, whoever was
Which is a
doing
new
that
Oscar category.
was so good. Like just like they got the mannerisms down.
Yeah.
It was timed perfectly. When he thinks that Poe Dameron dies and goes like rolling away, you're just like,
Crushes your
His
heart.
head goes dips down.
you're like, little guy, come on.
right.
And,
And when Poe is alive, and he's
Yeah.
like freaking out. My moment was like when he sees R2 for the first time, both like then
Yeah.
and then when R2 comes to life. I'm like, you're just like a little baby cat, and it's a big cat. And
it was.
I love you.
I feel like anybody who has a pet will relate
Yeah.
to BB-8, but also like he captured the magic of the droids from the first movie. Not the droids, really, R2-D2, because C-3PO, let's face it, has always been kind of grating and kind of a foil, and
But also is portrayed as a annoying person purposely.
right,
That's, yeah.
exactly. So BB-8 is not that.
Yeah.
BB-8 is this embodiment of good and is mixing with the right crew. Like,
Yeah.
got a lot of good people around him. What did you guys think of Poe?
I thought Poe was great. I know he's not in a lot of the movie, but he had some of the funniest moments. I mean, actually one of the earliest funny moments in the movie, which is when he is taken prisoner and he has back-to-back some great lines. The first being the, do I go first? You go first. And then he makes almost a meta joke about, I can't quite understand you with the mask. Oscar Isaac is a great actor, and so, the character wasn't sort of really a main character. I have a feeling we'll get to know him more in the other movies, but when he was on screen, I liked him a lot, and I thought that him and Finn, we haven't talked about either, had great chemistry together. Like, the fact that they sort of had an instant rapport, I thought the two actors really sold that sort of buddy-buddy nature.
I can't believe we haven't talked about Finn, because he is the person who grounds this movie and makes you care about it, like it gets the first moments and carries it through. Like the enthusiasm that John Boyega has for this role is just super infectious and sets the tone for everything.
Like sort of challenging arc too, that he is defecting because these evil people in the First Order are just too evil for him. I love that. That's like a really rough start to the movie. Like, it is very dark. It is very PG-13 from that opening, slaughter. So for him to go along with just this wild ride, like, this is such an exciting adventure for him, I think is so great. And it's funny seeing, on the press tour, his rapport that he has with Harrison Ford in real life it's just exactly how Finn is with Han Solo in the movie. And I love that he's calling him Solo. And he's
Hey,
like,
big deal.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And I like also that Finn is scared, and his instinct is to run a lot, and yet we're not like, what a wimp, what a coward. It's like we kind of get that he's just overwhelmed. He was suddenly kind of faced with the reality of what he was doing, and he's just like, I just want to get the hell out of here. But we also see that there's an innate goodness in him, and he does, even though ultimately Rey doesn't need his help, he does run to help her in that part and goes to rescue her. They had a great chemistry too, and so Boyega was perfect in that role.
There's like a heroism to him from the moment he decides that he's not gonna support this cause, but then he really puts himself out there to rescue Poe.
Yeah.
Like, upon meeting him, like, essentially once for a little while, he's like, okay, this is the right thing to do. He says that direct line, this is the right thing to do.
Undercut by the "you need a pilot," which was a great beat as well.
I mean, I like that, but like, I actually think it is also, he's like, this is the right thing to do. And then, both that Kylo Ren fight in the forest is a hero moment for both of them, because he's the one who first takes it up and is like, I'm going to challenge this guy. I mean, he wielded a lightsaber against what you're assuming is some stormtrooper he knows,
right.
like in that other scene. But he's taking it up against somebody who's definitely had a little bit more experience with a lightsaber.
And has the Force.
And he clearly didn't.
Right.
And then super, like, up in the air at the end. We'll talk about the questions that remain, but, like, he basically got his spine scorched out or something. Like,
yeah,
it was
but I mean, if we can come back from like losing our hands.
Do
and like
you
being
know how
attacked
far
by-
they've evolved Bacta in
I was
the
gonna
30
say,
years?
I really wanted him in a Bacta tank. Just
No,
in his
because
underwear.
Some things
in the
you can
books
take
they
it-
have like Bacta patches and there's like Bacta ointment. So
We've talked-
Bacta pills at this point. You just pop some Bacta.
We've
you're good
talked
to go.
a lot about the heroes, and I think Kylo Ren is obviously the standout villain, but Poe Dameron was sort of a one-dimensional hero in a way that totally worked, and I really liked General Hux as a one-dimensional villain. That really worked for me. I read someone
Good
comment,
Nazi speechifying.
Yeah, that he's a sneer in a suit,
Yeah.
and I love that sort of way of describing him.
I didn't need him to be more than what he was.
Exactly.
Like a lot of people were like, "Oh, there's no depth to that character." I'm like, "He's evil, man. He's
he'll
like
come back.
that
He'll
Nazi."
escape.
right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I will say, as much as I loved what we did see of Captain Phasma, I know this is the characters we loved. I sort of loved Phasma before I went into the movie, and I was sad we didn't get more with her, and that she sort of was just like knocked out, and that was it. But I think we're definitely going to get more of her in the next
I do too. It's always difficult because it's like, she became such a centerpiece of marketing and whatnot. There's posters with her. Yet JJ was like, she's only in the movie a little bit. Still, the amount of sort of pre-hype she had made me wish she had one action beat. Because really she just says, kill all those guys. Like she orders some stormtroopers to do something, but she never even fires a gun, I think. So I do feel like she needed the one beat, and I do think in the sequels, she'll get more.
Possible maybe that for time they shot something and they're like, that's left on the cutting room floor, and they were upset about it too.
Right.
Kathleen Kennedy has said that she's going to play a factor in the series going forward, and if they threw her in the tank in the garbage chute or not, like she survived it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think all the villains survived it, even though you don't see them. Like,
I think so
Right.
too.
So, okay, well let's move on because I think we've covered off on characters. I was also a little upset about the underuse of her, but like I think she's a Boba Fett character. You get the menace of her in this movie, and then will pay off later. Now a lot of things that. A lot of people have been talking about this. You talked about this a little bit in your review. There are a lot of callbacks to this movie. There's a lot of sort of like reference to the New Hope, and you can see Starkiller Base and the Death Star having parallels, and even some of the like trench fights and stuff like that. Too much nostalgia, just the right amount of callbacks? Do you think they went too far with anything? What do you guys think?
That was something I did a spoiler-free review of The Force Awakens, so I had to sort of walk around that. But to me, having The Force Awakens structurally be pretty much the exact same movie as A New Hope did sort of rub me the wrong way. I thought that, even some of the characters felt like, oh, it's just another Death Star.
It's like a template.
Right, and right from putting the key information in the droid, except instead of a princess, this time we have a rebel fighter. Even, some of the really small, like going to a cantina, that obviously is a callback to Mos Eisley Cantina.
Yeah.
Even having, it's more of an Empire Strikes Back moment, but like when C-3PO is between Han and Leia when they see each other for the first time. I was like, I felt like this movie didn't necessarily point fingers so much at it. A lot of the things worked. Like I really liked when we see the Millennium Falcon for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, that hunk of junk."
It's
like,
garbage.
Yeah.
She actually said.
The best thing is like I didn't even think about that. When
No, it was great.
It like totally subverted my expectation in that moment. Then
Because you
they
think
pan
Han
over
Solo
to
is going to be flying it, and I
Right.
love that was like a piece of marketing that we just completely misunderstood.
Yeah,
and it's Ray
so
and
good.
Finn. But I did. It took me out of it a little bit because, when we got to the part that, again, spoiler, I'm going to say it every time before I say it because it's such a big deal, but like before Han Solo died, when he was like walking out over the walkway, I was like, oh, come on. There's no other place for like a father and son to fight in all the galaxy than like over a massive like cavernous
Guardrails
portal.
are also not popular.
I was like, come on, you guys.
what function did that thing serve? It's just this
not
one little
safe.
path across this humongous
Do you think it's
chasm.
like
It's called the
bowling?
confrontation
Do you
platform.
think it's like bowling where you can like opt to have the bumpers up, but he just opted to have
I would
down?
hope so.
But I feel like I was maybe in the minority in the office about that. How about Eric?
No, I do agree with you. It's actually my one thing I would sort of most directly criticize about the movie is it is too much callbacks, even more than the prequels, which certainly had huge echoes, but has one single movie. Yeah, this one was extremely structurally reliant on the old ones, especially New Hope. Like you said, I mean, it's a nobody on a desert planet finds a droid with the secret plans, teams up with a group of people, including an old guy who knows the past history of the Jedi.
Sure.
Then there's a super weapon they have to get, so it was very, very similar. And to an extent, I was fine with that, but then there were sometimes I thought they went a little too far. And my biggest issue with it was probably the Starkiller base, because it felt really like an afterthought. It did feel, it felt like they felt they needed to do it, but they didn't really have a lot of ideas for it. So it's like, oh, it's bigger than the Death Star, and it can destroy multiple planets at the same time. But there wasn't any weight to it. I mean, dramatically speaking, weight to it. So that was the Starkiller base aspect that I kind of felt, I wish they had something else to do.
I was surprised that they went through that. Sorry, I'll be quick, but like I was surprised they went to that point so quickly, because I thought, we were talking about sort of how they killed the Republic all at once, which I thought was interesting, because in A New Hope they overthrew the Senate off screen, and to me it felt like, oh, we're showing it, but it's the same idea. But I'm like, there's no Republic. Like the First Order has been destroyed. Is the entire next movie just going to be Luke training Rey? Like, what is there even left to do out there?
Well, Snoke is out there, and I think that was the point. I feel like he was just the puppeteer of the entire First Order. Like, that's how I felt about his character. Like, he's the people who he is like actually wants to save, because he's like, let's get this guy and this guy, get him in a shuttle, bring him over to me. And then I think everybody else they can just recruit and, steal from people's parents and make them into stormtroopers. But I agree with you. I think the Starkiller base was the bridge too far or whatever. It was kind of the thing where I was like, oh, and then we're going to get the trench sequence. And it was all very cool, but it was the thing that I was like, we have to have more ideas like this. It worked in Return of the Jedi, because it's like, okay, that's a callback. And of course they're going to try to rebuild this thing. Yeah. But like 30 years later, they rebuilt it, but it's like 10 times bigger.
Right. And still just has one area.
Yeah.
Destroy the whole thing.
Yeah,
they got to fire their design team. That's what I'm saying.
I want to hear like a record scratch and be like, wait, what? They designed this the same way again? Come on, learn from the history books, people. But I don't know. I mean, for the most part, the nostalgic beats really worked for me. And I feel like they were really, really careful not to go super cutesy with references. Like, probably the cutesiest one was the trash compactor.
And the chess.
Which
I was okay with. I thought that was
the
cute.
chess, it just kind of came on, and he's like, oh, whatever. They just threw that away. But like the trash compactor thing was like, oh, that's spot on, right on the nose.
Yeah. Though Finn was a sanitation worker, so it would make sense that he would know where that is.
It did actually tie in. So yeah, I mean, I thought for me it was kind of. It wasn't really problematic until that. And honestly, just watching the movie, I was so caught up in it, I didn't draw a lot of those parallels while it was going on. It was just like, oh, these character moments are cool.
And I didn't know, Terry, for sure. Like, I'm curious myself how much we're supposed to take it that the Republic is gone. They didn't really make that clear. And I don't think it was supposed to be that, like, the Republican, I do think we're supposed to think that, like, important people were taken out, but I don't think we quite understood at the end, like, who did die of significance in that one attack.
They left out a lot of information even leading into the story, like, why is the Resistance so small if that's the ruling body of the galaxy? Like, there were things like that where you're like, why is it called a Resistance if they're in charge? Usually you have a resistance when somebody else is, being. Well, I guess in World War II, the Resistance was just kind of part of the fight, right? But they were occupying an area in World War II that
also,
belonged to somebody else.
How did General Hux not destroy the actual Resistance base? Why? I thought that was a little strange.
Think about that.
I was like, why did you? Were they really that close?
The thing about that moment, the destruction of planets moment with the Starkiller base, was a little weird, because it was like in A New Hope you had Princess Leia there to be the person who cared very,
we
very
knew what
deeply.
it meant to her, at least.
You destroy 3 random planets and you're like, cool. To people on the surface.
That would have been the Jar Jar cameo moment if they were going to include it. You just see Jar Jar looking up as
of right now, we don't know whether or not that was Coruscant, but I like to think that they were on Coruscant. We were talking about that earlier. We both had that thought where we were like, hey, is the Republic still on Coruscant? That would be cool.
Yeah, it would be. Is Mom Mothma there? What's going on?
We've talked about favorite characters, but I want to talk about your favorite moment or moments. We can paint a little bit more than one favorite moment. So, what was a pivotal moment for you, or what was a moment you just really loved?
A lot for me is in the end of the movie, but and we've talked about some. But certainly the Falcon reveal is great, And then a big one for me is, her calling the lightsaber to her. It's such a strong moment, such a great moment for so many reasons. But then I will say, and I guess one more spoiler warning, but when there's the death of Han Solo, we were talking earlier about whether that actual moment had huge impact, and that for a lot of us it probably didn't, almost because we could predict it only because of Harrison Ford even, and thinking
he's for
so long. But in the aftermath of that, probably the biggest moment that kind of I had the weight of his death is the end when Rey sits down in the cockpit next to Chewie. And it's just like, and the fact that, and they, by the way, they put her in a vest. Right. Star Wars isn't subtle all the time. It's like, she is now going to be the pilot of this ship. Chewbacca is going to stick with the ship and stick with her. And there was something about her like sitting there, knowing Han really liked her, even asked her to be on the crew of the Falcon. Right. So that moment played, that was probably where I felt like the absence of Han the most in the end of the movie. And that worked really well for me.
Mine definitely were Rey moments. Even though we saw a lot of it in the trailer, I think our introduction to Rey, I love that whole sequence. I thought it was beautiful. That was the first time, I'm like terrible about picking up on score unless it's like really in my face. But that Rey composition was the only new piece of the score upon first viewing that really struck out to me, and I thought that it was just like a lovely piece. Yeah. And just, it was pretty much just a silent sequence of her exploring and coming down, and we get to know her just because of how she's acting, and I adored that. And also the sequence between Rey and Kylo Ren when she really stops him. Yeah. When he realizes just how powerful she is. I thought that was a really interesting, gender play, and also just showing this new side of these characters and having her really realize what she is capable of.
And showing the doubt within him, because you can always tell he's putting up a facade anyway, and so when she can kind of resist him, Adam Driver I think does a really good job in that scene too, of kind of showing he's trying to act like, I've got this, and then you're like, nope.
And that's the first time we see him without his mask on, too, which I think is a really powerful moment. And, he really embodies the physicality of Kylo Ren, even when he does have the mask on. But when he has it off and you can see his face and that doubt and what you're talking about, I thought that was a really powerful moment from, as we've said, two of the actors and characters who I think were the strongest new additions.
I think, a lot of people are kind of lukewarm on the Han death, but I actually really thought, from the moment he screams out Ben on the bridge, not only is that a huge reveal, but it's it was kind of this is a father who's trying to control his son, which is the hardest thing in the world. I think is you can't. It's difficult because you're not going to always take lessons from your dad, especially when you're under the influence of something else. And there was that moment where it looked like, okay, I'm going to give this up. That's how I took it, at least. I'm actually legitimately going to give this up.
And he puts the saber in his hand.
Well, there's that visual cue, right, when the darkness comes down all the way.
And so, to me, all of that worked, and he stabbed him, and that, was horrible and everything. But, the moment that really got me in that sequence is when he touches his face, you're still my son. And I was like, oh, dude. I'm actually, now I'm thinking about it, oh my God, I'm actually starting to cry here. But that, and then when she lights up the saber, I was like, those are my two favorite moments. And then anytime BB-8 was on screen.
Oh my God. Again, the BB-8 R2 stuff, I was
when he shot the little grappling hooks out.
Oh no, we haven't even talked about it. The BB-8 thumbs up.
Oh my gosh.
Take all my money. Just take it all.
That was amazing.
If they don't market, well, actually, it's not a very good tie-in, but if they don't market a lighter like that, they're doing something wrong.
They should.
Not a lighter for cigarettes, right?
Right.
That sticks up in here.
Right.
There were so many good moments though, and then action sequence-wise, I think for me, the one that worked the best was just the Falcon, through the wreckage on Jakku.
Yeah. Did you see it in 3D? It was 2D for you.
I saw
so
2D.
We all saw it in 2D. I hate 3D, but this is the first movie where I was like, if the 3D is done right in the theater I see it in, I think that the 3D could be really cool in this movie, especially in sequences like that, because I think JJ's so good with the camera of really getting you into the scene and feeling like you're moving with them. So yeah, I'm I have not seen that yet, but when I do see it, I'm excited.
That was a great sequence, and then I did love the lightsaber fight overall. That being both the Finn portion and the Rey portion, just because it was sort of very different than anything we've seen. These sort of young characters who all were kind of just being very brutal and blunt, Kylo Ren is the only one who has any training, but you still know he doesn't have all the training. And there was just something very capturing the desperation that I think all three characters have that was really well done. It wasn't it wasn't the super choreographed prequel stuff, but it also wasn't sort of the more like slow stuff of the original trilogy. It was just something in between of just like slashing at each other. And when he used the cross guard to pierce his shoulder, that was I winced in that moment, and it was also like, see where that cross guard can come in handy.
We're all doubting.
That's right.
You and McGregor, you're wrong.
But I think it's interesting. I mean, we talked to Adam Driver and John Boyega, and they both said essentially what you're saying, which is that the original trilogy was stage combat. The prequels were more of a dance, and then this one is what John Boyega said is it's ignite to kill.
Yeah.
And you feel that, and like we as the audience know. No, a Jedi can't kill. But, if the Earth literally hadn't separated Kylo, or Ben, and Rey, I got the sense she would have killed him. And I'm like, would that have been a point of no return for her, that she was ready to do that?
Slip one up and forget it.
You're just going to keep
You
going
just want
back
the
to
musical version of this movie.
Going back to the Phantom of the Menace.
the Phantom of
So I agree. I think it's weird because like the emotional beats of that lightsaber fight were all like it had some of the emotion of the best lightsaber fights that we've seen.
Yeah.
And I think you dismiss the prequels. That's one of the things that's the most wrong with the prequels for me, is that when those dances start, you don't care enough about the proceedings to be like, I don't want to see anybody get hurt in this fight. And you also don't feel like they're going to necessarily get hurt until they die.
With the exception of the Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, which I still think is like one of the best lightsaber battles.
But like beyond that, after that, I feel like, I know you really like the one from Sith, but this had that emotional element that it needed to have in order to be like one of the great lightsaber battles.
Yeah. I mean, on one hand, it's funny because, there is a stretch on, the fact that Rey has absolutely no training. Even the fact that I was laughing about the fact that I'm like, man, it took Luke like 3 years to pull a lightsaber into his hand. And she just did it, which of course raises questions about, who is she? Is she just someone innately powerful with the Force, or is there more of a biological thing going on? But I still think they really did sell. And I think also, of course, it's supposed to be like, hey, she's good fighting with the staff. Right. That's like, so she's already like got some skills in that arena. And I think you are invested at that point with all three characters and where they're coming from. So that means everything. I
mean, we're going to get into questions we have and solutions for that. But I think she has had some training. Yeah. I think she probably, I think when she goes back to Luke at the end, it's a return to Luke. It's not,
you have a good theory about that.
Yeah, well, I'm actually stealing a theory from Daniel from Rebel Base. We were talking about it a little bit. I don't want to really give away his whole theory, but like, what if she was, there in training?
We know there were people who Luke was training.
Yeah, so I'll let him expound on it. But there's possible that she had training. She knows how to fight already. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's from defending herself on Jakku. Maybe it's more than that. But I also think if everybody, like these Force-sensitive people, can notice that she is now in the world and like, sort of attuned to the Force as acutely as she is now, like, she's powerful because she's causing like ripples in the Force. You know that like if people are sitting up and taking notice, Force Awakening.
The Force is awakening.
Then like she's there to be awesome.
We've talked about our favorite moments, but I do want to talk about the moments that didn't work for us. And one of them for me, as much as I appreciated it, was how quickly Rey knew how to do everything that, as you said, it took Luke 3 movies to do. She didn't have training. She didn't have Yoda, that we know of speaking in her ears saying this is how you do it. She just knew she could do a Jedi mind trick, and
Do you know how high her midichlorian count is?
I cannot wait until we find out on one of the toys.
It was gonna break that little meter that Qui-Gon had.
I do hope that when we find out more about Rey and her origin, which I think is inevitable, whether she is Luke's child, which I hope isn't
not.
the case. I think it's very easy to do it that way. I honestly hope that her parentage isn't that important. But I think when we do find out more about her, I want it to be explained why that came so easily to her. Whether it's this theory that Rebel Base is probably going to get into more, or whether it's just that she is so incredibly powerful with the Force that it does come naturally.
Yeah, because, you know, that moment we keep talking about, because it's a great moment of her pulling that lightsaber out of the snow, another visual callback to Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, like, we got the idea in Empire, and nothing so far in any of the canon has contradicted this, that was the first time Luke did that. And that was 3 years since the events of New Hope. So it's like, the fact that, she was able to do that. It's both, on one hand, it's like, oh, it's just a funny thing because that's what they want to do in the moment, or will they actually address that and just, how powerful she is?
I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, this will be explained later. But I think for the sake of the movie, it's really cool to have Rey's arc go so quickly. But I think what's interesting is J.J. Abrams is a very frenetic, very quick filmmaker. He doesn't waste a lot of screen time, and I think if you go back to just the style of filmmaking in the 70s, it did take its time a lot more with these scenes. And so I think, upon repeat viewings, because we've all only seen it once so far, we're going to glean a lot more
change quickly
from the movie. Yes. But I do think the first time I saw it, some of the beats maybe I missed or I felt were really skimmed over just for the sake of keeping the story going at this quick pace.
This is kind of an aside, but they're going to have a real hard time keeping certain things secret and not showing footage if Luke is a heavy part of the new movie. I mean, we know he's going to be, but
Episode 8.
Yeah, you're going to start, Episode 8. You're going to start thinking like you're going to be able to piece those things together if they show too much footage of him in the trailers for that. Which is weird because it's like you're gonna then keep him out of marketing materials, or they'll just have to be general.
I think they'll embrace him being a part of the marketing, but of course they can still be selective on.
Well, I thought what was interesting is that J.J. Abrams said that the thing that got him hooked to the idea of doing Episode 6 is the question of who is Luke Skywalker.
Right.
And because of that, I expected us to at least get something of that in this movie. And by the end, we still don't know who he is. And that's okay. But in terms of this being its own movie, which is what I thought was the goal, I thought having such a big cliffhanger ending where Luke is basically the item, that the MacGuffin that we're after this entire story, not have any sort of real resolution was a little bit of a strange note. But though it did leave me really excited to see, okay, now that you've done all the nostalgia stuff, now that you've established everything, where are we going that's different? What are we doing that's different? Let's have a weird Episode 8.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's similar to, I guess, what JJ did with Star Trek, in that he's like, I have all this stuff that I have to deal with, and I have to get through this thing and take it to a good place so I can tell more stories. Now, I don't think, we don't even need to draw connections between Episode 8 and Star Trek Into Darkness. I don't think it's going to follow that path. But,
and it's Rian Johnson directing it.
Yeah,
it
is. And they've been working together on story for a long time.
Yeah.
And so obviously it's going to work in that world. It's going to continue on. To me, a cliffhanger did not bother me at all. I knew I was going to get a cliffhanger. I thought it was going to be something pretty major. But
But it's interesting because that ending, because I do think the movie to a fault is emulating the others, especially New Hope. But the end doesn't. It's not like Phantom Menace, which also had a big celebration with everyone standing on stage.
Yeah.
It goes in a very different direction and is the first of the 3 trilogies now to have the first movie end on a cliffhanger. Yeah, Phantom Menace has the who was the master, who was the apprentice, but not as big as this. This is like a mid-scene cutting off. But that does make me even more excited about what's next, because I don't think they're going to be as nostalgia driven. This movie was so important as far as relaunching the brand and relaunching Star Wars. I think we're going to go in I don't expect the next movie, except that it probably will be the second one's darker, but I don't think it'll feel like Empire Strikes Back as far as hitting the beats as hard.
Well, we get to see Luke as a Jedi Master, right? That's going to be the story, essentially, of Episode 8.
Why is he at the Jedi Temple?
It's going to be the treat of Episode 8, and the Jedi Temple and all that stuff is just, we're going to get a lot of lore that we haven't gotten before, we've gotten in the EU, but not now this is canon, so we're going to get all kinds of new stuff.
Let's talk about Snoke, though. We'll get into the questions we have about him, but did he work for you?
He was a little weird to me because he was sort of nebulous, and at a glance, it was like, oh, he's pretty Palpatine-y, hologram guy, bald, kind of disfigured.
Palpatine meets Gollum.
Yeah.
Meets something from The Hobbit.
Yeah, so in this movie, he made no impression on me. Very sort of ethereal, but certainly, again, raises huge questions. Who is he? Where's he from? Where does he have
this big?
Yeah, is he tiny? Is he giant? Or is he a normal-sized dude? And yeah, where does his knowledge base come from? He can't just be some random guy, right? He's got to have some connection to something that even gives him this knowledge. So yeah, the character, I wasn't like, ooh, cool. I just was like, okay, well, what's his deal?
Well, the tease for him was a bit like much for me. Like the marketing tease was like, oh, the physicality of him could not be reflected by not doing mocap, and it's like, you could have very easily
could have been.
put makeup, I think.
But what we saw in this movie could have been done with a guy,
But
We'll
he
see what it
he
is.
looked like he looked like a mashup of like Voldemort and Gollum or something like that to me, with a huge I don't know, gash in his head, whatever that is.
Yeah, I thought he felt a little like stereotypical, like Marvel villainy, like sci-fi villainy, like what we've seen. I can't even think of an immediate example, but like he felt sort of stereotypical in what we have come to establish as like evil creatures. But I want to give this the benefit of the doubt and say we could get something really cool.
Yeah.
Before we move on from
we know one thing: he's a total egomaniac.
Yes, he is.
It's like, not only am I going to have an entire temple, that is dedicated to my holographic image, it's going to be like the friggin' Lincoln Memorial.
Snoke loves Snoke, man.
I thought it was interesting Maz had like a statue of herself over her like pirate base too, but I was
I honestly thought that was a story thing. I think they were like, don't forget, this is Maz's place.
Right.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, they had some interesting visual cues.
That was kind of weird. I was like, I don't know that this woman would erect a statue to herself.
You had a bit of a Chewie issue in one particular scene, though. I know you wanted to bring up.
Oh yeah, it was funny because Scott Clora brought it up too. Just a weird beat, which is simply when Chewie, when they return after the spoiler alert, after Han's death. They just do a very strange, it's a staging thing. It's because he literally walks by Leia. So it's like the two characters who should be the most, and they are separately the most wrecked by Han's death, don't even look at each other. They don't hug each other. There's just this weird non-beat between them. And it felt kind of weird because it's like they wanted the Leia and Rey thing to happen,
which is also
weird, but it was at the expense of Chewbacca, who's literally in the scene and walks by. So it just felt very strange. I was like, maybe Wookiees grieve differently, and she knows that, and she's like, I need to give him his death, because they had a great moment earlier when they hugged, when Han and her were so uneasy, and then Chewbacca goes up and hugs her. So that was just really strange. It was like, Chewie, Leia, deal with this.
It's funny because we've all only seen this once at this point, so it's really tough sometimes to talk about a movie in this much depth when you've seen it one time. But it's funny what people pick up on. With the excitement of this movie, there are details that people are like, can you believe it when this happened? And I was like, I don't know that I saw it. I don't know that I even remember them hugging, Right. That's kind of how it is, like you're sort of racing to put it all together in your mind. But interestingly enough, and we knew this was going to happen, but this episode left us with so many questions too. And obviously we talked about the big cliffhanger. What were some of the other questions that you came away with, like obvious things? I mean, I guess the really obvious like stuff that we all think is true is that we don't see any of the villains, not die or die. Like they could have died or they could have not died. I don't think they would do an on-screen death for any of those guys, but that's, I guess, a starting point as a question mark, as we don't know who of those people is alive.
Yeah, I believe, I'm almost certainly sure Kylo Ren is still alive.
Yes.
Captain Phasma, I believe we all know, will be coming back. Yeah. And General Hux, they made a point of saying he escaped. Snoke, obviously not there. So I think we still have our four main villains. Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of the questions, of course, are around Luke and Kylo Ren, I guess. Like that whole history, we get a little that thing about he's trying to train him, and then he was embracing the dark side. It's an extreme thing to hear that Luke Skywalker chose to just take off, because there's a part of you that's like, dude, Luke, deal with this situation.
Why the Jedi Temple? What is there?
Yeah, and like, wouldn't he want to sort of if he saw that his nephew was turning to the dark side, wouldn't he want to stick around and kind of help squash that?
Well,
so that's my big question.
About being turned, right? Like, I think he's always worried about being turned. He was on the verge of it. I think that was the point of Jedi, is that he could have. I think Kylo Ren is the version of Luke if he had been seduced. He's kind of like, Jim and I did a conversation about this well before the movie about like how he could be kind of the anti-Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like, he's the person who decided to go in, and actually like chose it, and then followed up a bunch of times. Like, hey, let's get more of this dark side in here.
Right. I mean, because we going into this movie, we also talked a lot about how it was very interesting to kind of realize in the marketing that, oh wow, there aren't other Jedi. This is the biggest probably divergence. Well, there's huge ones anyway, but one of the biggest divergences from what the EU was the idea that by this point there would be like all these hundreds of new Jedi.
Yeah.
But I do want to know. I don't know if I agree with the theory that Rey was like someone who trained under Luke at all. But I do want to know about who else might have, and what happened to them if Luke just sort of abruptly stopped training them. They still have the Force.
Well, I got the sense that Kylo Ren came in and killed them all.
You think that?
Was I completely off base?
Well, I didn't get that.
Because we see that scene like in the rain.
I didn't get that detail. Like, what were the Knights of Ren people he converted, or did he
Right.
just kill, or
We don't
did
really
he
see
kill
them
the
in
ones
action.
and then?
And that
Yeah.
whole dream, we should, again, this is something we have to, when we rewatch this movie, I think we're all going to be paying so much attention to that. When she picks up that lightsaber, I said, I think I hear Yoda for a second, which I think would make sense because I have the idea that it's like the past and future and present,
Yeah.
But so much happens, and like that quick glimpse of Luke with R2, and yeah, it's like
Well, that's him giving the plans.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's him. So
I
that's
think
the-
so.
So that's the other thing. It's like, what made Luke change his mind? Like, hey, now I'm going to put this map out here so you guys can find me, but only the right people. And he sent it with R2, and then the other
Why was
interesting
R2,
thing is in the trailer, it's not that you see the lightsaber come
like
from.
Maz
it looks
give it
Maz
to,
giving it to Leia.
or to Rey.
I think we never knew for sure because it was just hands, but I
That
think
could
it was
have been
Leia.
like in the flashback.
Yeah.
Maybe,
So-
but why wouldn't Leia have had it?
Yeah, so and remember all the rumors about like, oh, this movie's gonna open with a lightsaber like floating in space, and did you guys hear that one? Like,
No.
that's how,
I did not.
like Luke's saber was just gonna be floating out in space, and I'm like,
I think the big question that we haven't even touched on is like, who is Rey?
yeah,
Yeah.
Are her parents important? Why is she so powerful? Was she hidden on this planet? Because I got the sense sort of maybe she was like put on this planet to be kept away from Kylo Ren
Right.
when he was going on this whole rampage.
And I do agree with you that obviously she's hugely powerful in the Force, and she is important for that reason. I don't want her to be a Skywalker. I think Kylo Ren is there to be the lineage, of this series. He is the son of Leia. He is the nephew of Luke and the grandson of Vader. I don't need her to also be a blood relative. In fact, I'd much prefer it if she's not. But you have to kind of find out what is the story there.
yeah, and you see, in that flashback, you see like the arm of one of her parents, right?
Yeah.
Like leaving her on Jakku. I'm the same. First of all, we'd have to explain Luke having somebody that he impregnated, for one thing.
Yeah.
And he is a Jedi, so like maybe he is actually following the Jedi thing of don't be in love, like which they broke in the prequels.
the horrible results.
Yeah.
The horrible results. And it seems like anytime you take up the Force, you just are kind of screwed.
Yeah.
You just don't do it, people. Just carry a blaster, be cool. Yeah, and then the other thing is, we have to figure out what her parentage is and where she has all this Force power from. I thought there were some weird moments, and maybe this is just first viewing and me looking and pressing. I thought there were some weird moments where everybody kind of seemed to know each other a little bit, like Han and Leia and Rey and Kylo. Like obviously
Everyone connected to Rey, you mean,
Yeah.
not knowing each other as
The Force, it always gives you a weird thing because, it's like you never know if it's supposed to be a literal, like, I know you, or if it's like the Force brought us
Recognition,
together,
yeah. Sure.
there's something important about you. Like with Han, because, like everyone else, I'm like, is she going to be Han's daughter, And So I'm like, for a second you're like, oh wait, but then I do think it was with him supposed to just be like, oh, this girl's awesome. She's a great pilot, mechanic, and I see a sort of bit of myself in her, but not because she's my daughter. But yeah, you did wonder like what was going on with some of the interactions.
I just thought though maybe it could have been like a guilt thing where he's like, I failed my own son. This is another child who like is without a family who I would like to be a better.
He literally
parent
gives her a
to.
Place to like
But I did think it was so weird that Rey and Leia had never met before.
Yes.
And Leia, like again, we know that Leia is force sensitive. It could have been something where she felt in that moment that Rey was there and that she would have experienced this. But I was just like, why of everyone, not Chewie, like not these other people, would she embrace Rey as like a I'm sorry, consoling.
And in a movie that had a lot of, to its credit, I think, humor. That was like a little self-deprecating, like
We'll use the Force. That's not how it works.
Right. I almost needed that to be like, maybe they could have had a moment of like crying, but even being like, nice to meet you, to like acknowledge that like they've never met these two women. Yeah. And it's hard to think at what point in the story they would have even had big conversations. I guess they would have come up to some extent because like, Han said, I saw our son. He's carrying this girl, that she was helping us. But yeah, since none of that happened, it was weird to not have any acknowledgement beyond the like, yeah, you could say the Force, but you needed a little more. But.
One of the big rumors about this was that both Han and Chewie were going to die in this movie, and so even all these people, and I think I bought into this too, that she was crying over Chewie in that moment in the snow.
There's a moment I thought they were going to kill Finn. I was like, please don't. I love
Oh right, yeah. And then Chewie, didn't die, and so he becomes, he's with Rey on the Falcon now. How far is that gonna go? Do you think that's just it? That's the combo from now on?
I think a lot of things do make sense as far as we'd already heard there was they were casting for a new major female role in the next movie, and she'd been doing chemistry. The actress has been doing chemistry reads with John Boyega, and everyone was like, what does that mean? And it's like, okay, well, but this movie, they're very separated to the point they say, like, we'll see each other again. But you get the feeling the next movie is going to be like, yeah, it's like Rey, Luke, Chewie, and R2 are going to be this group, while back at the Resistance, we've got Finn, Poe, Leia, C-3PO, and BB-8, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think, like, this is going to be the new Falcon crew for a little bit. I mean, obviously everyone's going to come back together again, but I do think it's Rey and Chewie in that cockpit now.
I think that they need a different threat for the Republic. I think that they need to have they're going to want to have
Snoke, you mean?
Yeah, they're going to need to have like space battles and all the stuff that people are expecting. So how are they going to execute that? What are those elements going to be? Is it just going to be more stormtroopers? I'm sure we're going to get something a little different. I think stormtroopers will probably evolve.
You want a twist with both Snoke and the First Order, because if it is just like, hey, the Empire was actually kind of awesome, let's do that again. Like, again, that worked for this movie on a nostalgia level, and I understand it, but yeah, you kind of do need something else motivating them.
Who is Snoke?
Right.
What are his goals? Why do Leia and Han know him on like a name basis? I think that's a huge question. And I think for me it was really exciting, the concept of Luke going back to the first Jedi temple, going back to the origins of this religion, this way of life. Could Snoke, I mean, there have been those rumors that Snoke is Darth Plagueis, who we've heard about in the prequels, the implication is that he trained Palpatine to be a Sith, and I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but like...
There was a great EU book that he did, but now it does not canon.
Yeah.
So.
But like, could Snoke be someone on that level?
I think he is on that level. I mean, I think he's also trying to recruit sort of people to really do his dirty work.
And does he have other people?
I'm sure he does, and I think hopefully we'll see some of the other Knights of Ren, unless they're all dead. But
I mean, I feel like getting that
will.
Little glimpse of them, you kind of be like, okay, they're out there.
I think we don't know the like extent of what that means, what that order is. Do you guys think that Kylo Ren was just like a mashup of names, and it's like Sky, Solo?
Probably.
Probably.
Jim had a moment like that where he was like Skywalker, like Solo, Kylo.
Yeah,
probably.
and I mean, I think a lot of people are going to draw that conclusion, but it's an interesting conclusion to draw purely because it points to I think he chose that name, and so it's like kind of calling back to his parentage.
Correct me if I'm wrong. In the movie itself, they never use the term Knights of Ren or explain who those guys are with him, right?
No,
like,
I think
if we didn't know that going in, we would just be like, oh, and there's that
I
weird.
thought
I think
Snoke
Hux
said,
maybe said something.
yeah,
Okay.
someone does say it once.
I guess the only reason I'm asking that, even if I guess they mentioned it once, it still applies. Is when I was a kid, I remember I had a trading card of Darth Vader and it said Dark Lord of the Sith.
Right.
But that was my only context for what even Sith was. It wasn't, and it wouldn't be until the prequels that word was even said on screen, So there's kind of this tradition of like, there's this stuff there and we'll get to it, It's like, we'll flesh that out.
If you think back to the very, very, very first piece of marketing that we heard on Force Awakens, it was just the names.
Yeah.
And I think that
done on trading card style.
that is that theory come to life. It's like, this is just, it's not just the movie, it's not just the comic or whatever. Like, we're going to reveal things that are important. They might not pay off for 10 years, like
right.
you might, this actually reminds me of the other thing. Rey is not her only name, right? Wasn't there an early version of her name that was different? Or we saw it at
there was a
Star Wars
rumor.
Celebration?
I don't know.
I thought there was a rumor of a different name, but it ended up being Rey. I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Like, I
There was
have
like
to
a leak
actually go
something
back
that
and
was
look
different.
at some
But it is
stuff.
funny because going into the movie, we did go, oh, they're not telling us Rey or Finn's last name. With Finn, there was a big story point that he had no last name,
Yeah,
Which I love.
I like that they resolved that.
Yeah,
like,
but
really
Rey,
well.
you do again still like, okay, she was taken,
She was young.
yeah,
She
she was
was
young.
waiting.
So what exactly is the deal there?
And also, going on names, this is a very small detail, but I thought it was interesting that Kylo Ren's real name is Ben. Is it because of old Ben Kenobi, which Han and Leia both would not have been very close with, or is there another reason? That he was
I mean,
Ben?
I think absolutely it is. I mean, on one hand, you can say it's because of fan service, but I think there's enough there as far as like, Han did know Ben, Obi-Wan. Leia didn't really, but
he was just important.
Right, but there would be a connection with Luke, especially if Luke was like, I'm never going to have a child, I do think there's enough there to say, like, why would they pick the name Ben that sort of works besides the fact that, hey, it's kind of cool that he's named Ben.
It's also that, like, he's the one that essentially brought them together. Like, it's a relationship thing, too. It's like, oh, yeah, old Ben is the one who brought us together. Beyond that, it's interesting that his name isn't Obi-Wan, it's Ben. It's his, like, adopted name from when he was in hiding.
Yeah.
And that's how Han knows him.
Yeah.
So if it is that callback, it's not just like, we're going to honor him by naming him this thing and our friend. It's like one step removed from that. It's like, this is how Han knows him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing. I want to talk about the final shot of this movie, which, there's a lot of things that we could speculate about this particular thing. But what do you think is going through Luke's head at this moment?
I feel like he just seems to have this look of sort of sadness and almost inevitability. So it's like, how powerful, we assume he's very powerful in the Force at this point.
Right.
So how much specifically he was sensing of what was happening, the events of this movie, I don't know, but I feel like he, to some degree, gets it. I don't know, though, just when he sees that saber and looks at her, I just think that there's like a burden upon him, that it's like he feels this weight upon him and that things have gotten even worse.
I agree, and it's like, was he avoiding it and running away, or was he trying to like find a solution? Obviously, everything about Luke is still a question after seeing this movie. But I also felt like there was a moment of recognition for Rey, which goes back to that question that we were talking about before, which is like, what is, these moments of recognition that seem to be between her and Han, or Han and her, and Leia and her, and Kylo Ren and her. So is that there with Luke? Does he just recognize that she's like super Force powerful, or is it like, oh, hey, you're someone who I've known before?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I keep feeling like it's not going to be I literally know you, like we've had a previous encounter, but I do think that he would recognize her strength in the Force.
Yeah. For sure.
And the fact that she's coming to him with that lightsaber. It would be funny if he's like, hey, I lost that. Where did you find that?
It seems like he doesn't want to take it. He's like,
it did kill a lot of younglings. I might point out how many younglings that lightsaber killed.
Yeah. He looks at it and he's like, there's a lot of weight to that individual object. And it's also sort of a relic for Kylo Ren. So it's like one of those things where it represents a lot of different points in Luke's life, and now he's like, oh man, this thing, it's like a bad penny.
Yeah, because you do wonder, does he even have, does he still have that green lightsaber from Jedi?
Hell yeah, he's got it.
Yo, you are very determined.
You'll jettison yourself from the Star Wars fandom if he does not still have that.
No, I just love the green saber, but
don't you even dare insinuate he doesn't have that saber.
He doesn't have it. Okay, so school me on this because I don't know. When you become a Jedi Master, do you do a new saber, or do you just? I
think when you become a Master, you can still hold on to your saber.
Can you?
Again, I'm saying, but of course, in canon, we don't have no idea of anything. The only reason I'm asking is because Yoda, who had lost his saber fighting Palpatine, we know, did not seem to have made a new one on Dagobah. I mean, we don't know. He could have had, I got one in the cave over there. But we didn't seem like he had one. It seemed like he didn't feel he would need one again. So that's the only reason I ask if Luke's like, oh, I guess I'll be using one of these again.
How did you guys feel about him not saying anything?
I think anything he could have said was kind of like anything we could have said about him in a review or anything. Like, it would have been spoiling some element of what's going to happen in the next movie. If he had said her name, or if he was just like, said, like, any acknowledgement of them knowing each other in any way, or him knowing of her, would be something.
I also just think, there's nothing that he could have said that, I don't know, like I joked, going into this movie, because we did wonder, maybe he just shows up at the very end, and I joked about him just showing up and saying a really fan servicey line, I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm here to rescue you, or I am your father. But that aside, I don't think anything he could have said, could have had more weight than just seeing him. And also, by the way, don't forget that all 6 of the other Star Wars movies only end with music. Like, they all end with a silent, no dialogue sequence. So I just thought, they wouldn't break that artifice.
That shot was beautiful.
Yeah.
Too. That's what they've been filming in Ireland on the whatever cliffs.
Yeah. So do you think they just shot that a couple months ago? I think and then.
Well, they started episode 8 and we're shooting.
That's
there.
Right. So they're just picking up there, and
assuming,
shooting more.
What's interesting is there was this whole hidden marketing campaign, he was hidden from the marketing campaign. That's what I should say.
It's got to be the easiest role ever for Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
I mean, they made all this big deal about I hate growing the beard, and I'm wondering how much of that stuff was just put out there to be this is. Even the timing of his appearance at the location was kind of
because he did that one photo posted where he was standing in front of the soundstage and said 7, remember, with his arms crossed,
right. And I think there were some moments in there where we were just kind of led astray. Even a table read with him being at it is just. He didn't need to be. He
didn't need to be. I mean,
maybe he had more dialogue.
I mean, he did need, because he lost a lot of weight to do this, and it looks, if you just saw him on The Flash, he's lost even more. But that makes sense because episode 8 will have a lot more. But it is funny that he did lose a lot of weight and grow that beard for 30 seconds of screen time, but 30 important seconds of screen time.
Yeah, very important. I think it's definitely that is. Do you guys think that the next episode will start at that moment? Because that's
never happened.
That's a totally different
I would love
thing
a time jump, honestly.
Yeah. I think it will be. I think he'll been training her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though I
Kill
guess
Bill
the question
style.
is also, will it pick up immediately with Rey and Luke and Chewie, or will
and
it,
R2
and R2, or will it be something where we catch up with the Republic and the Resistance?
Yeah, I was thinking.
You'd think after waiting so long for this movie we would have some answers, but nope, it never ends. We will be talking about Star Wars until we die, and we will all be in these chairs.
I do too.
My final words will be, I hope episode 23 is good.
I hope for all y'all. If it is true in the afterlife there's no time and space, we'll be able to watch all the Star Wars movies at once.
Oh, there you go.
The Force will be with
and
us
the standalones
always at once. Yeah, so obviously there are a lot more questions for us to dig into. We're not going to do it all today. We're gonna pace ourselves, guys, and you should too. Don't neglect your entire life.
2 years till episode 8, but forever Star Wars.
Yeah, but seriously, I was joking the other day, we're gonna now turn our Sauron's eye towards Rogue One.
Well, you mixed your geek metaphor there.
I know
Listen, we already talked about Gollum.
Yeah, we talked about Gollum.
Turn your holocron cube.
That's way more on point. So anyway, tell us what you guys think of all this stuff. The comments here are a spoiler-friendly zone, so share your theories, tell us what you think, and always, we will be talking about the Force, Star Wars, Luke, Kylo, Yaddle.
BB-8.
We'll be talking about all this stuff
Rancor Keeper.
for years and years to come. Stay with us. we're out of here.